I want to share just a little bit of information with you about where we are, how we got to where we are. Alan Bays, our consultant, shared information about our experience over the past year, and while there was a lot of good things about our experience, the overall experience ended up not so good. The board was looking at a renewal for medical insurance that was going to cost an additional $1 million. Fortunately, you know, the county's in good, sound strong financial condition, but we all know budgets are tight. Coming up with an extra $1 million unplanned is not something easy to do. So in looking at that issue, the board reviewed the options available to it and how to deal with that. And they were able to make some contractual changes that reduced that increase down to about $600,000. Those contractual changes don't affect benefits, don't affect employee costs. They're strictly administrative, technical issues, save the county money, but they don't affect the value or the performance of the program to the employees. So that's good. But that left $600,000 to cost increases. Now typically, the two things that we would look at would be, one, modifying benefits to try to save money. And what that comes down to is shifting costs from the employer to the employee. Some of you will remember that at one time we had a 20% coinsurance. The insurance paid 80%, the employees paid 20%. Then we increased the coinsurance to 25%. Then we increased it to 30%. We've made other changes that have shifted costs from the employer to employees over the years. You know that starting in 2011, we started charging for employee-only coverage, whereas before that we didn't. We also raised employee premiums for the first time in over 20 years. And we've raised them each year since then. Of course, you also know that we've had very few raises in the last number of years. So when the board was looking at this and looking at their options, they didn't feel like modifying the plan and reducing benefits was something they wanted to do. They feel like the plan is in a good place. It is a good quality plan that represents good value to employees, and they didn't want to diminish that any further. In terms of employee premiums, same thing. They didn't want to increase everybody's cost of insurance, particularly in a time when we haven't had raises very often. We're still below inflation, and the board was not in a position to where they felt like they could guarantee that they would be able to give raises this upcoming year to help offset an insurance cost increase. Now that's something that they're very concerned about, and I know they're going to make every effort they can to try to address compensation, but at this point in time in the planning process, they didn't feel like that was something they could guarantee. So they took both those options off the table. And so really where that left them is there was not much else they could consider to do to lower that $600,000 cost increase. And so they basically decided to absorb that and to fund that and not pass that on to employees. So in terms of short-term costs, that's going to be the increase to the county, and the county will fund that. But looking longer term, there's a continuing concern about the sustainability of our insurance programs and being able to financially sustain that. So the board also looked at other things that have driven cost increases over the years. And two of those leading drivers are the cost of spousal coverage and coverage for tobacco users. So let's talk about spousal coverage first. When we looked at the data over this past year, and I can't explain why it is, I can speculate about it, I think I understand it partly, but the fact is the cost to cover spouses is significantly higher than any other subgroup. To cover spouses is roughly $8,000 a year in claims. Employees incur roughly $5,000 a year in claims, and children are a little over $2,000 a year in claims. So you can see spousal claims are really a driver of overall cost. That's just the way it is. So looking forward, the board asked, okay, is there anything we can do about that? And one of the things that we also saw is we're covering a lot of spouses who have coverage available through their own employers. So last year, you may recall, the board considered and talked about possibly implementing a spousal surcharge or discontinuing coverage for spouses if they have it available through their own employer. They decided not to do it at that time, but this year they decided to implement the surcharge. And so Eddie, Mary will talk to you the details about the spousal surcharge in a few minutes. The second surcharge is the tobacco surcharge. MedCosts provided a data that indicates that the average tobacco user incurs about $3,800 more claims a year than a non-tobacco user. We all know tobacco is not healthy to do. We all know it results in higher medical claims over a person's lifetime. It contributes to other illnesses and diseases. And again, this is something the board considered last year. They decided not to do it then, but this year they decided to implement the tobacco surcharge. And again, neither of these surcharges are going to help us out in the immediate term in terms of saving money, but the hope is over the longer term they'll begin to shift some of those cost trends to help us manage some of the claims costs a little bit better. So I'm going to ask Mary if she would to talk with you about the details of the spousal surcharge, and then Eddie will talk about the tobacco surcharge.
Okay. Okay, David mentioned the reason for the spousal surcharge, and basically it is in an effort to encourage employees who cover a legally eligible spouse on our plan and have insurance available through their employer to go onto that employer's plan. The surcharge does not apply to a spouse that does not have an employer, a spouse whose employer does not offer health coverage. So that would be the answer to your husband is self-employed and does not have access to insurance. So that takes care of that. If you have a spouse that is covered under Medicare and does not work, then it does not apply to that situation as well. I think that was a misquote in the Roanoke Times article over that was in the paper over the weekend. So again, the surcharge only applies to covered spouses who have access to health insurance through their own employer. For this open enrollment period only, the board has granted a 3-month grace period before the surcharge starts. So if the surcharge applies to your situation, the deduction will begin in February 2015. The surcharge, when it is imposed in February of 2015, it is $75 a month, and it is added in addition to the regular monthly deduction for employee spouse coverage or for employee family coverage. So the premium with the spousal surcharge for employee spouse would be $296 per month. The family coverage with spousal surcharge becomes $398. Now, next year, to coincide with our open enrollment period, the spousal surcharge will increase to $250. And again, this is in addition to the regular monthly deduction for the cost of employee spouse coverage or employee family coverage. The increased deduction will start in November 2015. All employees seeking to cover a spouse will need to complete the certification regarding spousal access to other employer coverage form. This is what the form looks like, and it is included in the packet that I handed out to you. What you'll want to do is, of course, read the top, and then question 1, is your spouse currently employed? If the answer is no, you would check the box marked no. You would then sign, date it at the bottom, return it to Human Resources. If your spouse is employed outside of the home, or if they're employed outside of the home, then you would check the box for yes. You would complete, then it would be taken to the to the spouse's employer for them to certify that coverage is either available or not available to the employee. Once you have that information, you will sign, date at the bottom, and you will return it to Human Resources. These are due back by November 30th.
So if your husband's self-employed dairy farmer, you wouldn't want to
He would
know.
fill it out as
Okay, he
the
would fill it out
employer that
himself.
coverage
Okay.
is not available, but you would sign and date at the bottom as the employee. Once you return that to us, we see that he does not have coverage available, therefore the surcharge would not apply to your situation. Okay, if anything were to change throughout the course of the year, if your husband decided to no longer be a dairy farmer and he accepts a position somewhere else to where insurance is available to him, you would need to recertify. We ask that you let us know as soon as that would happen, but certainly no longer than 30 days after that change. If a Botetourt County employee fails to return the spousal certification, the payroll deduction will automatically default to the surcharge rates that we talked about. You will be required to certify that the information you're providing is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, and that you also understand that intentional falsification or significant omissions will be grounds for retroactive collection of surcharges due, denial of benefits, retroactive termination of coverage, recoupment of benefits improperly paid, and disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. Any questions? The certification is due back to Human Resources November 30th.
Kelly, could we leave them here with you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, I can-
well, your husband,
Does he have to sign? Okay, I knew I had to sign it, but.
yeah, since he is self-employed, we would need his signature.
Okay.
Well, there's a place for the employer to sign.
Yes, there is, so we would need that. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Eddie, who is going to talk about the tobacco surcharge.
I just do all the bookkeeping, so. It's half my business.
For the tobacco surcharge, Botetourt County defines the tobacco surcharge or user as an individual who has used any tobacco products, including but not limited to cigarettes, cigars, pipes, herbal tobacco products, chewing tobacco, dip, snuff, electronic nicotine delivery systems within the last 6 months. The tobacco surcharge is in an effort to encourage the employees to stop using. All covered tobacco users that have used in the last 6 months would need to look at that within the last 6 months if they've used. There will be a 6-month grace period. If the employee quits during the grace period, documentation to support the non-use would need to be given to Human Resources, along with an updated tobacco certification form by May the 15th of 2015. There is a 25% premium increase that is effective June 1st of next year, and you will see that on your May payroll. Effective December the 1st, it will increase to 50%, and you would see that on your November paycheck. The premiums would be employee only, $42, employee spouse, $277, employee child, $128, employee children, $252, and employee family, $404. Changes need to be reported to Human Resources as soon as possible, but no later than 30 days. Along with an updated tobacco certification form that would be required. Moving from non-use to tobacco use or vice versa, of course, is not considered a qualifying event. The initial tobacco certification form would need to be turned in to Human Resources no later than November the 30th. If a Botetourt County employee fails to return the tobacco certification form, the payroll deduction will default to the tobacco premium. You will be required to certify that the information you're providing is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, and that you also understand that intentional falsification or significant omissions will be grounds for disciplinary action, including but not limited to termination of employment from Botetourt County, and may result in denial or retroactive termination of benefit coverage for anyone covered, in denial or retroactive termination of and recoupment of benefits improperly paid. You will also be required to authorize and agree to screening for tobacco use by any covered person for reasonable cause. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, well, let's see, I guess that's it. Any questions?